Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. Today, I am with the amazing Las Doctoras. Las Doctoras are reclaiming their ancestral cultures, creating spaces to heal from generational trauma, and living into liberating practices. Together, we have Dr. Renee Lemus and Dr. Cristina Rose, who host a podcast, a book club, and offer online writing courses. They create spaces to discuss healing from the wounds of generational trauma while grounded in ancestral wisdom, feminist scholarship, and a commitment to dismantling white supremacy, patriarchy, and all forms of systemic oppression. But on the real, being in the presence it feels like sitting in their homes, which they both just purchased their first homes. And we're just going to imagine that we are sipping on some tequila and talking about the infinite possibilities of liberation. Okay. Let me take a sip of this water. Imagine it's tequila.
Berkey water here.
Mm. Cheers.
Cheers.
Stay hydrated. So where is it that the both of you are calling from?
I'm calling from Lakewood, California, my little hometown, or my new town.
Yay.
I love it. The owning of it, Renee. It's so good. So good. I'm calling from these islands in the northwest of the U.S. They are all the San Juans, the Whidbey Islands, and I'm currently on Whidbey Island.
Whidbey Island. And it's just, I was just telling Dr. Cristina, I'm so used to saying doctor before your names because I'm like, it deserves a reference. You work for it. But I'm so used to seeing Cristina on a boat that when she came on camera, I was like, wait, is that an actual building that you're in and not a boat?
Yeah. The sacrifices, of mothering, parenting, trying to, work with the pandemic and everything. But it feels good. I have this beautiful, I'm so grateful for my life. Grateful.
Yeah. With that being said, what are you celebrating about yourselves today?
You always ask this, and I'm always like, oh man, we really got to step into.
How do we always forget that part, Renee? Let's celebrate. I mean, I feel like we're bitching. We're starting this semester. I just prepped 5 classes. I'm preparing my child and my family for this transition into the fall, which who knows what it really looks like, And we have this beautiful community around us and a beautiful flow that's emerging for our work with Las Doctoras, and we have each other. I'm just like, there's just so much celebration.
Yeah, I think the same. I feel the same. Yeah, so I'm teaching 7 classes.
You didn't tell me.
I know. It literally just came up in the last few days, but so I just prepped almost all of them. I think just really I've been in my home now for a few months, but it's still kind of strange. It's my first home. So I'm really trying to kind of take ownership. I touch the walls, this is my house. It's really strange, but yeah, I'm grateful for that. And definitely celebrating us, as Las Doctoras. And I think it's surprising, but also this is what we've wanted. This is what we've been trying to do every time we kind of reach a milestone. We were both our podcast and our book club at this point have been nationally recognized, which is super amazing. and I'm like, what else? Oh, and we're going to be starting season 4. I felt like that, we're going to be starting season 4 of our podcast.
Coming full circle, right? There's this, I'm on my moon, so I'm feeling this beautiful sensitivity. And as you were talking, I was just like, oh, I'm going to cry. Beautiful.
Yeah, because I remember when actually, Renee, you were in Roots Rise. Was it a little less than a year ago now?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was around this time last year.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember one of the intentions that you said. Well, I feel like many of us who come from backgrounds where we're constantly being in service, where we work within communities, it feels so selfish to name the things that we want for ourselves. And one of those intentions you set was owning your own home. And here you are. I'm like, whoa, that happened really fast.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Yes. And I'm really excited to dig into today because spelling is a spell, right? And so many of the dreams, the intentions that we set out for ourselves can oftentimes be clouding our mind. But until we can actually put it down on paper, it's something that then just like remains a dream and nothing more. And so I want to celebrate the both of y'all for the seeds that you've planted, the spells that you've written, and how they have literally blossomed into fruition. So I know that the both of you are professors and I mean, I'm just thinking about the pressure of so many of us who are children of immigrants whose parents want us to have these titles. And here you are checking off the boxes, and yet you have been able to expand beyond just being doctoras. So if we can take out those titles, how is it that you would describe your medicine?
I think, wow. It's so hard. I think we have to name that. It's interesting to say taking out those titles, because I think we've come across a lot of resistance within ourselves and outside of ourselves. Like, I think we've been trying to claim it in a way that's not holding up these like elitist standards, right? Because I think in some circles we've been called too academic, and then in others in academia, not academic enough. And so I think we've kind of come to a place where we're saying, like, how can we both hold these titles while it kind of reframing what that means, outside of academia. So that's it's kind of an interesting question in terms of like we're compartmentalizing that. But in terms of our medicine, I think that we're really just trying to, we want to acknowledge that there's a lot of wounds for people when it comes to writing. And we try to kind of explore where those wounds come from, and then help people sort of take back their voice and take back this creative form, that is not some, we've been told so long that writing should look a certain way. Writers are supposed to be doing certain things, and we're kind of saying, no, we're going to throw all of that out the window and step into your birthright, of writing.
I love the conversation around borderlands, that we are like, on La Frontera in so many different spaces. I love the conversation you brought up about home and about what success means, and it's so interesting. We've talked about all of these recently on our podcast, actually, because I think a lot of feeling has been coming up for us around what it means to be where we are, in the spaces that we are. And to me, I love, Renee, what you said. And I think it is, our medicine is from our wound around, all of the scarcity and all of the smallness of the boxes that we were, kind of built into. And writing really has been our liberation. And we want to share that with other people. We want to share the skills that we've learned. And getting a doctorate in part was maybe so I didn't have to give any more F's, or something like that, so I could have made it somewhere, but that doesn't play out in the same way that I thought it would, right? It actually has just been the space where I found freedom, which is interesting. Well, the most freedom I could find at the time, and I think that yeah, our medicine is our wounds and our healing, you know, that we're just sharing with other people.
Mhm.
Specifically
Well,
our community, you know, people who want.
yeah. Yeah, I feel extremely privileged because I feel like I have an inside scoop of your story medicine. But for our listeners, share more about your ancestral lineage and how this has influenced your path today.
I feel like this might be in a moment where we could talk about our similar stories, you know, because they are similar. We grew up in neighboring towns, Pico and Whittier, the children of beauticians and I don't know, how would you synopsize our fathers?
It worked for the sheriffs.
Yeah, they worked for that like sheriff's department.
Really?
My dad was a police officer, and I think your dad was a civilian, right, working for the sheriffs. Yeah.
We both went to religious schools. We have family, and you know, in the Southwest in Mexico, you know, just so many similarities. We both were maybe people pleasers in our different ways. We both, you know, succeeded by fawning, and we both weren't happy, you know, when we met in those spaces, you know, and we've been seeking spaces that can see our full selves our whole lives. When we met in our children's, you know, classroom in Long Beach, when our kids were 2 or 3.
I want to say they were like 18 months.
Oh,
or maybe barely 2, like barely, like, and like not yet, maybe.
That's a long time, Renee. A long time. I didn't realize that. We were just shocked by, right? Renee was like, I think I was like, what's your kid's name? Santos. What's your kid's name? Jaguar. You know, like, what do you what do you do? You know, and it was just like, if you haven't heard that story, it's our magical moment. You know, where we
what do they call it?
Parallel lives.
They call it the meet cute, right? Like in film, you know, language. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Sometimes I forget how closely our paths, you know, were. You know, it was just very much this like fateful moment that brought us together. And I think even beyond all of that, like Cristina was saying, we were both looking for something. You know, we were both moms of young children and kind of, I don't know, going between these different communities, really searching for something that was kind of everything that we embodied, right, which was our ancestral heritage. So I think we kind of alluded to it, but I have a family from Mexico, and you know, really always have been very close to my culture, but still kind of trying to look for some kind of like reclamation of that. You know, I think we both have wounds around assimilation and white passingness and just a lot of different kinds of those things, and being very invested in wanting to give our children, you know, our culture and our traditions, and really just trying to find community around that. And I think together we've been able to do that, but also together we've been able to kind of create those spaces ourselves, you know. And I'm like, what else? And I think in terms of what we kind of have been, what our work has evolved into, it's along the way continuing to like recognize our wounds and how we've been able to work through those wounds. And I think a big one for us coming through academia, because I think there is a lot of mystery around like what academics do, unless you've been through it. But it's like it's really challenging. I mean, when you're in
Witches, you know.
Yeah. That's basically what I was waiting for.
I mean, it's just this very like, you know, what do you do? And I think, but there's also a lot of trauma, you know, there's also a lot of trauma that comes with being in these academic spaces that were not created, you know, for us. They were meant to actually push us out and kill those things inside of us. And so being able to come out the other end and being, I think writing was a big wound for us in terms of we had to really, really conform ourselves to this academic style of writing, which is why we still get called too academic. It's like, yeah, we spent like how many years having being forced to conform in. And so, yeah, that's going to kind of come out. But I think there was also this like urge to want to break out of that and to want to kind of get back to, we're both very creative people, artists, right, in our own ways. And it's like, how can we do that? Like, how can we come back to our true authentic voice? And I think also because we are professors and we see our students and how much wounds they have around writing, and they're early in their academic careers, right? They're 18, to early 20s, and they have such a hard time really feeling like they're good writers. And, so we've kind of already have been having to do that for so long. And we're like, we know that there's people in our community who also have that same challenge. And I think we're kind of here with the degrees to say, we give you permission to F all those rules and say, you can, yeah, we have our doctorates and, we don't need to abide by all those standards.
Because the magic is in you, right? The magic is, I think that's the gift of having our children. And maybe the philosophy that brought us to that school is we really believe, each of us has magic, creation, like this beauty, and just things get in our way, and so we're healing from the traumas of all those things that got in our way that we assimilated to, and and how we still enforce those within ourselves, and also just trying to love into that wounded part as well as like the little child part of ourselves, and sharing all those gifts as much as we can with our community, because it's our responsibility, and it's our joy too, it's both, which is amazing.
Isn't it wild? You go through all of this schooling only to now be in a place where you want to let people know, like, it's okay, it doesn't matter. It's almost like we're all walking contradictions, right? And I'm curious, how is it that you navigate these complexities, because you're still working within the institutions and you still have to give out grades, you still have to read these papers, you have to fit into this mold, you gotta keep your jobs. And so how much autonomy do you have within institutions, and how is it that you balance out creating these spaces outside of them?
We laugh because I think that we're still trying to figure that out, right? We're still in the mix of stepping outside of the imposter syndrome. I think there was a while, we had our podcast for a while and we didn't tell anybody at work. we didn't tell anybody in our institution until we were featured in Oprah magazine. And then it was kind of hard to hide it. It was kind of hard to, like, we were on this like national platform. And so I remember, like, it had already been weeks, maybe even a month since we had been on the Oprah magazine. And I was like, I should probably email my chair about this. Like, this should probably be something. And I was really nervous because then I thought, oh shit, they're going to listen to our podcast and they're going to hear maybe some of the ways we trash academia, while, so like you said, that is our reality, is that we have to work within the university at this point, because that's how we buy homes, and that's how we, are able to send our kids to the schools that they go to. And, there's a lot of ways we depend on that. But I think at the core of who we are, we've always, you can't be a radical feminist without having a little rebelliousness. And so I think there's ways in which we try to, like, infiltrate this is like thinking about what kinds of readings we have our students do, what kinds of assignments we do, even our approach to grading, right? I think we're not trying, for us, grading is not gatekeeping. It's not, we're really trying to come to it from, a different perspective, really looking at the whole picture of a student versus, any one thing. I know for me, a big way is, I know a lot of my students are coming with writing wounds. So it's like, how can we break down the writing process in a way that doesn't bring us all anxiety, and then looking for the heart of what they're saying versus like trying to sift through all the grammar stuff, but yeah, I think we're still trying to figure that out. Like where do we belong in this kind of, like Cristina says, these borders between academia and outside academia. And we're always kind of towing that line and figuring out how we do that. I think more and more we're like, this university system is effed. It is, we are exploited 100%. So I think we're trying to shift that dynamic and be like, how can we exploit them? and start to create these systems or these ways outside of the university, right?
Yeah, wanting to create those mutually beneficial relationships as much as possible with everyone in our life, right? Kind of really acknowledging the energy that's being exchanged, so that we don't get resentful. I like to say it is like 7 generations. I just like to say, like, we're just, a part of this. I'm creating liberation so our children can, move into more liberation and choice. And I also, I have said to my students, the only religious institution I'm really a part of is the university. and it's because, it has been, within like the structures that are the systemic, those beings that are in our world that, like the IRS, church, the university, it's like, of all those things, it's the one thing I'm still a part of. But we do have conversations, often about what it would mean to liberate ourselves, from this,
like that's the goal. I think we are really trying to manifest. I mean, I know I am trying to.
Let's take trying out of your language.
Okay. I am manifesting not having to teach 7 classes a semester, and maybe just like 2 or even 1, or even take time off from it completely. Because I mean, it's absolutely an exploitative relationship. And I think there's an expectation oftentimes to go above and beyond, right? For academics, it's like, this is what you get paid for, but if you do extra, then we'll keep you. And so the way I kind of deal with that is I'm not doing 1 ounce extra than what I get paid for. I don't get paid to go to meetings. I don't get paid to be a part of, the bureaucratic nonsense. I don't even get paid to answer emails. So we're both really strict about our boundaries around when our students can send us emails and expect, correspondence. Like, I think that's a big way, like super setting boundaries, because we're not being compensated. We're barely being compensated enough for the work that we do, much less these expectations to go above and beyond. Rather that extra energy is going towards these other things that we're doing that, again, hopefully will allow us to shift our energy more in this direction, than in the university's direction.
I do want to say, I think about myself and my university and undergrad, and I could never teach at my undergrad, actually, which is Biola. So I'll just name that. I could never teach at the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, like ever.
How did you end up there?
Right? Story medicine.
Christina's got she's had several lifetimes. Okay. Wow. Like in this lifetime, she's had several lives.
Gemini rising, Renee. But I can, and I do want to teach, with I want to be that person that I needed when I was an undergrad, and so there is a part of me that I love my students. I love the opportunity I have to, where I'm placed in their lives. And there's this magic and joy to that too. I, I wish it was, valued in those ways, if that, even that language was used, like, how could we be the person we knew when we were younger? How can we like liberate people and, our students? That's not, that's not a part of the language of academia, and yet it is for me. So there is that, and for both of us, truly, I know there is a magic there too.
Yeah. And I think too, you kind of said this before, Cristina, about like, for better or worse, when we were coming of age, the university and academia was the safest place for us, because we were the nerds who loved reading and loved writing and loved, being in those spaces. And so at the time, school was the only place that we had to kind of be our full nerd selves. And I think that's where we find ourselves, is like, wanting to be that safe place for our students, right? Where they can come and be their, full selves, and simultaneously being, now we get to create other options for people, right? Like the university doesn't have to be the only place that they can go and feel safe to. And I think too, because right now, in the university, we're dealing with 18 to 20 somethings, in our work outside, we're dealing with folks our age. And I think that there's a reality of people who didn't get that, in the university. They didn't take a women's studies course, or didn't take a ethnic studies course, or just they weren't there, in college, or maybe folks who didn't go to college, and have wounds around that, and so we're trying to, I think kind of do that. And so it's interesting how, there's all these different places to navigate, but I think the short of it is, we're still trying to figure all that out.
Hey, look, if you can manifest a house within a year, look at all the seeds that have already been planted. So let's talk about the spaces that you're carving outside of academia. You are attracting other people who have gone through these institutions, and it sounds like you're also beginning to attract people who never had the chance to even be in that space. So what have the common wounds you have been experiencing with the people who have been joining your programs?
The wounds. I remember we talked in our last class, and it took me back to wounding too, that I had forgotten about libraries, public libraries, growing up. If they felt accessible, if they, as young kids, if they felt welcome in the library, and who was the librarian, and what does a librarian even look like, and it's usually someone who has white privilege, and it's a structure, for many, it was a structure of white privilege. Just the, just one of those, just a vehicle to reading, who is the gatekeeping that, that's one of the ones that's I'm thinking. Renee?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we kind of have these different, so we have our podcast where we just talk, basically kind of what we do in our class when we lecture, right? And then we have our book club where we like dive into a book and we, tear it apart, or we, look at the things we love. And, that's what we do in our classes too, right? And that's what we're doing with our book club. And then we have our writing courses where we just we really break down the writing process, right? Really kind of get to those deep wounds. And I think that people who've been coming have, whether they've come through academia or not, have always felt like those are things that they can't do, right? Those are things that, I don't know, right? There's these maybe stories that people tell themselves about why they can't read a book and, and dissect it, and their opinion and their critiques matter and make sense and are valid. You know, or when they're writing and they always say, oh, I try to write, and I'm like, well, let's look at what it is that you're doing. And we're saying, no, that counts. Writing is beyond the physical thing of like actually putting words to paper, but it's the imagining, it's the like brainstorming, it's all of those different things. And we're like, yeah, all of that counts. And so I think they come with these like perfectionist ideas of what these things are supposed to look like. And we're kind of like, no, you know, that's all of it counts. All of it is valid. So I think that's a big wound, is like this idea of perfectionism when it comes to what writing is supposed to be, what, you know, reading is supposed to be, you know, even I tell my students, you don't have to read every word of every reading that I give you. And they're like, what? I'm like, it's okay to skim, like,
wow.
you know,
paying attention. Yeah.
When they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, who's got time to read every word of it?
Hey, thank goodness for Audible. I just downloaded Audible and I'm like, wow, I'm like reading a book, but I'm actually listening to it. It's so amazing.
Oh, I
So
love
how is it that you're the space that you've created? I want to talk more about like writing to our ancestors and all the beautiful projects that you're birthing. How is this different then from somebody signing up for one of your classes at the university?
Can I say real quickly, just perfectionism? I really want to name what that means in this context. You know, I still think that means like writing like a person of male white class privilege. You know, that's what that means. And it's perfect in this really like far away sense, like because it's unattainable, right? And it's there's no way, there's no passing, there's no well, actually there are ways of passing in that. And I think we've tried to learn those so hard in our like academic life, and we want to say, no, you don't need to learn those. The magic, you know, is in you. So perfectionism, really naming what that means in the context of writing, thinking, anything that has to do with, you know, critical thinking, reading, writing, which Renee, I feel like, you know, the Las Doctoras University is what we're talking about. We're going to break down, you know, all those different processes. So, I love, can you ask your question again, actually?
So she was saying, what is, I think I was going to say, I think what we bring to Las Doctoras that we don't necessarily bring in our universities is, I mean, let's just name it our brujeria, right? Like we start, you know, and actually like it like so far that's been true. And I think that maybe we're trying to start to bring some of that into the university, really start to step into like our magic and not be afraid to bring that into our classroom. But I think that's what it is. We're really coming from a like, we're going to start every session with a meditation. We're going to sometimes do a little bit of shadow work by talking inner child, which is really tough for people, and can be very challenging, but also very liberating, right? We bring a lot of astrology stuff. We bring tarot. We're just kind of bringing all the different parts of our magic to that space, you know, with the ultimate goal of like, let's just write. You know, we're also big, you know, I'm like, the moon is a big is our goddess, right? Is our patron saint, as we say. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I would say. What do you think, Cristina?
Yeah, there's just, we bring artwork. I was thinking about, I teach a class on the witch, you know, and I have, when we met in person, I did ask everyone to help make like a tinctura together. You know, I was like, hey, everyone, you know, we're going to make this tincture, like, you know, and sometimes in my best moments, I'll have them stand up at the beginning of class and like stretch and move, and, you know, be aware of their in and out breath and the heat and the cold, you know, but it always feels like in those spaces, like I'm doing something maybe I shouldn't, or I'm doing something that is so foreign. And so what's really lovely about our class spaces is those are, for Las Doctoras, is it's welcome, you know, we built it into the structure of not just our classes, but who we are. And so, you know, so what are we bringing to Las Doctoras classes instead of the university? I think we're bringing our full selves. And it's I don't know if I had ever imagined a space where that could be, I mean, that's truly like healing those wounds of, not being seen or dishonored as children or in academia, bringing like everything that we are,
Yeah, there's no fear of, I think I'm always afraid, oh my God, some administrator is going to walk in the door and see us like chanting or something. And I mean, it goes even beyond just like the bruja stuff, but also like, I mean, we teach gender studies, which innately is already this like controversial thing. And we're even pushing those boundaries, like what kinds of writing, what kinds of reading are we having our students do? And so you're always afraid that somebody's going to come in and be like, whoa, you can't talk about these things, and you can't, and so I think there's always this like fear of who's over our shoulder. And so like Cristina says, we're not able to like just be our full selves. So when when I think that was a big thing for us in creating our own stuff, we're like, now we don't have that person over the shoulder. We can just be who we want to be,
And also teaching to students at the university who most of them don't want to be in our class. They're just taking it because it fits a certain thing, I feel like that's changing a little bit, but it is also nice to have students who know, because of our podcast, writing, whatever, our free, our offerings that we have, our soul offerings, they know who we are. So when they sign up, we know they want to be there. And wow, what? That's amazing. Yes, we want to be here too. We all want to be here together. And it's also creating a sustainable way of being for us too, like it's healing for us and it's healing for them.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of people out there who go through these institutions, who get the degrees, get the certifications. And yet I remember, Renee, when you were, I mean, he's probably not listening to this podcast, but when you were talking about one of your colleagues who is like 70 something years old, and you could just tell, it's like, okay, he got tenure, but he doesn't want to be there. And he's just counting down the days until retirement. And it's like, what is the point? Like, yes, you got the security, in quotations, you got the stability, but yet, did you really live your life?
Mm-hmm.
Is this why you jumped through all of these loopholes? And I think that there's so many people who, right, are just like, even though you accomplish all of these things, we're just settling for what, and it's still fitting into this mold of assimilation, of like this capitalistic structure of like, let me just collect the paycheck and not or just question what else could life have been like, versus, you know what, I'm going to utilize the system of capitalism to actually share my medicine without the fear of the administration, of these institutions, of my bosses coming in to say like they are like they're the adults who are shaming us as children, right? Because that brings out the wounded child, and it's like, you can't do that. That's dangerous. This is outside of the rules.
Our investors instead, right? There are investors.
And it's like, don't shame, like, what happened to your inner child in this process?
I see these older professors, and I'm like, do I still want to be here, married? That's the way I see it, when you're working, especially if you have tenure, which is why it's very tricky to be applying for tenure track positions. But it's like, you are essentially married. And I'm like, I got a marriage. Like, I don't need another one. I don't need to be tied to this university. And so I think that at the very beginning of when we started the podcast way back when, it was, how can we find freedom from this system, right? This academic system that inherently exploits us, does not give us stability, only if we jump through these certain hoops, which we're like, who wants to do that, right? Like, who wants to jump through these hoops? And if we're going to jump through hoops, it should be for things that, are much more fulfilling. And so it's like, how can we, to me, I think that's the true revolution, right? Like, when we talk about revolutionary, we talk about radical, and and it's that balance between like, yeah, like we're still working within the system, but we got our eye out the door.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a reality to our lived lives. Like we have children to take care of, and I think sometimes we kind of we wonder like what our lives would be like without kids, the risk security, factor comes into play just so much more. Being so responsible for these little beings, yeah, working it out.
What has it been like for you, though, especially last year during the pandemic, to be teaching online?
I will say, I think it was really tough to kind of it was like it was literally overnight. Like there was no grace period. It was like, here, you're done. I haven't seen a classroom in over a year and a half. And so I think it was tough. I'm okay teaching online. Like I actually quite enjoy it, only because I think we're going to eventually do a podcast on this, but like, I work my campus is about an hour, with traffic away from me. And so that commute, before the pandemic, I was like, God, there's got to be a way that I don't have to do. So even when the pandemic happened, I was like, did I manifest this? Like, so I don't have to commute. And so now I'm actually going back in person next week, and I'm kind of like dreading this commute. And I know all the things of like, it's not, teaching in person is very different. And I love teaching in person, love it, love it, love it. But I don't love all the other things, right? The commuting and there's just a lot of other things. So I think for me, I don't know, it's been this like teaching online has given me a bit of freedom, because, I have more time and space and all of that. And I get to be closer to home. I get to be at home. But I do miss teaching in person, but I don't miss the commute. So I don't know. That's how I feel.
I think when I went into teaching, an undergrad, I had like classes of 10 students, and we were in a circle and we discussed reading. It's basically like our classes, Renee, like, or our book club. When I went to go teach at the university after getting my doctorate, and I had classes of like 20 and then 30 and now 40 students, it's a whole different type of teaching. And when you're teaching 5 or 7 classes, that means you have 200 to 300 students. It's a lot. It's a lot. Even just the energy of standing up in front of 50 students, a lot different than creating a circle. So what I love about online is I get to have more one-on-one and small group interactions with students who can and want to be there, with me. So I create like optional spaces so we can actually sit together, and some students show up and I actually get to develop like some real relationships. It's almost like the students, right, that follow me back to my office after class, or something like that, which is wonderful. So I am grateful for that. And I also, because now the online teaching is, you create a platform and you can kind of repeat it, right? So it's like you don't have to like create things every semester. What that does is it gives me more time with their papers. Because with 200 to 300 papers,
oh my gosh,
it's so much. So, what it does, it allows me just a little bit more time with those, and it's kind of more time for relationship. Again, this is for the lecturers, right? Or for us who are part-time or teaching more classes, it works in the system, as education as, that university has manifested it,
Yeah. And I think a big thing that you're leaving out, Cristina, is that once this was announced, you're like, I'm out.
I did. I was like, do I say that? I was like, I don't have to be in Southern California. I mean, I miss Southern California. I miss you all. I just want to go to the beach with you all. Let me just say that. I want to go right now. Let's go. I'm going to transport over there. But truly, I do love being able to live, this adventuring, traveling kind of life. We bought the boat. We're like, okay, let's do it. We're going to live into that dream.
Yeah.
And that's what online teaching also provides. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, God, you just like made a really good point, Cristina. I think I keep thinking about the students, and like, I know that they would benefit more from an in-person experience, because there's just something about the in-person dynamic of having discussions and whatnot, but we're not dealing with ideal situations in any way, shape, or form. And for us professors who like when you say 200 students, I forget, like, I compartmentalize. I'm like, okay, this class has like 30, this class has like 40, this class,
Wow.
and then when you add them all together, I'm like, oh, you're right. It is a lot. And we have to read all of that. And then they wonder why it takes so long grading, or going through emails. And
I mean, let's multiply the papers. There's like 3 papers, a class.
right.
So that's like 1,000 papers, in a semester,
And so you're right to say that online is a better, I think there's been fear of me saying that, because I'm like, I know it's not the best for the students, but when we're putting ourselves first, yes, online has been way better because it's giving me more freedom, more time. And we're not dealing with ideal situations. The university, we would not have to teach more than 3 classes. We should not have to teach more than 3 classes to live our lives.
Like at 25 before, and now they've just,
I mean, we're teaching 5, 7 classes just to make it, like, just to pay our bills. And it shouldn't have to be that way. So when you put it, I'm like, yeah, no, teaching online is great because that works for us. If it doesn't work for the students, that's not our fault. That's the system's fault.
And it's like, why? Because if we look at even how universities are structured, I mean, I don't even know how much tuition is now, but I think that we forget that these institutions, universities, they are a business as well. And tuition rates have gone up. Last time I remember by at least 400% since,
and our paychecks have not gone up.
Yeah, and I think about how, like, you both teach ethnic studies, gender studies, and those majors were actually created by student protesters who said we need representation. And so now that finally, it's like, I mean, I have a lot of criticism as well on these institutions, and also I want to carve out space to really highlight how you are creating these spaces outside of academia. So tell us about how Writing for Our Ancestors and your new course, Sacred Writing, was born.
Well, I think I was taking your class, June, and I don't know if it was in the middle of one of the sessions, you're talking about like a sacred offering, and I'm like, what skills do I already have? What things do, like, where we're not having to like reinvent any wheels, right? Like, we're just using what we already have and doing it from a place of love and joy. And so I thought, oh, we can do a writing course. And so I think I brought it to Cristina, and she was like any of our ideas, right? It kind of is born as a little like nugget of an idea, and then we're like, if she brings me an idea, I'm like, yes, let's do it, or if I take her an idea, she's like, yes. And so it's kind of like a yes, let's just imagine what this course could look like, and having it be really simple, and doing the kind of writing stuff, and I think in a lot of the things, the podcast, the book club, the writing course, we've always been saying this is what we need. Like, it's not just what we needed then, it's what we need now. We want to create time for ourselves. So when we're like holding our writing courses, we're writing along with those who come. We're doing our own writing, we're doing our own processing. And so we're literally creating those spaces that we need in our lives. And we're like, how can we then share those spaces with the world and, get fairly compensated, you know? And so I think it was born out of that. Like I think we were coming off of the podcast growing, you know, and then we're like, okay, what's the next? No, and I think, and we had our book club, and the book club took off. And so it was kind of like, okay, what's the next thing that we can create to create more financial stability, but also just step more into like doing things that we just love and want to do.
I think at the same time, we were working on the Semillas de las Abuelas, which is, you know, a book that we've been writing to honor our ancestors and make sure that their traditions get passed on to our children. We've also been doing the work with Sylvia Poreo around inner child healing, and working with, you know, Leslie and Latinx parenting around the same things, you know. So the ancestral part also was just, I think, organic in how it came into it, you know, too. The more recent manifestation of writing to our ancestors includes what I learned in your class, you know, also, which is bringing in the ceremony and the retreat, you know, to kind of different offerings for different groups of people, so they also get to see who we are, but also wanting to have these different offerings for ourselves. We need retreats, we need ceremony, you know, we need these writing spaces. And I think sacred writing then became a deeper step into the writing practice for those who wanted to do that. It kind of encapsulates writing to our ancestors, but also just kind of brings it full circle back to the self, you know, and back to that healing process, and stepping into our sacred voice, or sacred writing.
Yeah. And I want to say, just like, you know, speaking of full circle, because it was a revelation recently when our book club got featured on this list. And I was like, when thinking about all the different things that we have a podcast, I'm like, that's like our lecturing, book club is like our syllabus, right? And then writing is like, you know, is so all the skills that we have in the university, you know, bringing them outside, and then bringing it full circle to the magazine that we created, you know, knowing that academic publishing is like the, you know, epitome of gatekeeping in so many different ways. And, you know, how can we, that next step, you know, it's like walking people and helping them heal their writing wounds. And then the like culmination of that in actually sharing their work, you know, out in the world, and sharing our work out in the world in ways that we never get to, you know, in academic spaces for sure. And so it's kind of taking that full journey, you know, that full like academic journey. Kind of, people don't realize that they're getting a degree, right? Like people don't realize that they're
Las Doctoras certification process.
Yeah. You know, but you know, in the end, when they publish, it's like, yeah, now you've graduated. Now you've graduated.
It's taking out the gatekeeper, right? And it's saying the words, the wisdom is already inside of you, and we are letting you know from the other side, we've been through the whole process, and you don't need to go through it. We can create the very spaces we can publish our own stuff without needing to go through all of these loopholes. And so much of it just comes down with being able to approve of ourselves first and foremost, right? Because I feel like what white supremacy, as well as our own inner child and ancestral wounds, have created for us is the need for approval from outside sources. Yeah. And like, I feel like this is why the work that we are doing is so decolonial, because it's like, great, you're here now. I can just remind you that you are enough. Yeah. So what has been the response like? Like, what are the transformations you've been able to see with people who have gone through your program so far? And who are the kind of people who have been coming?
Yeah, I think it's always surprising, both of those things. It's always surprising, like who's coming and then what their transformations are. I think like we did have one person who was, I think, working on their thesis or something, and they were able to kind of get passed a block, after taking our course. And I think they were able to complete their thesis, which we were like, yes, exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do. There have been people who wrote a whole short story in the time they were with us. People working on a book, and we're able to really dive into a lot of that stuff. Like
people who have never shared their writing at all with anyone, who read it aloud in our spaces, or who submitted it to the magazine and saw it published. It's really at all these different levels. I don't know if that's the word, but all these different spaces that people come in, seeing them grow into a more loving relationship with themselves and their writing. It's an honor to be there, for those beings,
And we can't deny also, I will say that I feel like I've been transformed because, again, creating these spaces because we needed them. We talk a lot in our course about the writing process, and everyone always thinks writing is writing. You sit down and you type, or you sit down and you write. And we're like, no, it's this much more expansive process, and really giving space for, like writing multiple drafts, or just brain dumping, and just writing, from intuition. And anytime I get stuck in my own perfectionism around writing, like I've been mulling over this piece in my head for like months and months and months. And I was like, oh, why can't I get it down on paper? And then I had to remind myself of the stuff that we talk about. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time out. You just want to get something out. And then, once you open the door, things start to flow better. So it's helping me to remind myself, that I don't have to have perfectionism around my writing. I'm like, the more I hold space for that in this class that we do, the more I'm able to step into that in my own writing.
Isn't our Chiron in Taurus? Like,
here's where Cristina's magic comes in. She's so good.
I was just thinking how it's like, our Chiron, or like that wounded healing, asteroid, is it what it is? Is in Taurus, I think, for us. We're gonna look at this again. I was just thinking how much this grounded way of being, and I think mine is in the 5th house and yours is in the 4th house or something like that. And
she's so good.
Oh, Esotericessa, thank you. Synastry readings, but just as you were talking, I feel really much in line with that. And the stability, actually, as you saw, I just felt very grounded. That is, we do this to ground ourselves. We bring other people into a space, and literally, like, I feel like, digging our toes into Mama Tierra, like we're really there in this journey together. So thank you for seeing the astrology as a gift too.
It really is. I really want to celebrate y'all, because I also want to point out the different energies that I'm feeling when you talk about being in academia versus when you talk about being within Las Doctoras. It's like within academia, it's like frazzled and like, I have like so many students and I feel so exploited and like just a lot of contraction. But then the moment I ask about writing to our ancestors, Saint Lunita, your magazine, your podcast, it's suddenly like an exhale. And I know that you are in this beautiful transition right now of like, okay, I'm still within academia and I'm calling in being just Las Doctoras. But look at how far the both of you have come in less than a year. Okay, like you had your podcast already, you had the book club. And since then, you've birthed your own course. And it's more than just a course. It is a ceremony. It is a return home for so many Latinx women. And I'm sure it started to attract even greater diversity. You're doing retreats. You've been featured in Oprah, in these other platforms. So you're doing it already, okay? And you bought a freaking house.
I love bringing in my Panay sisters. It really
Yeah.
is so beautiful to have more community around us. And yeah, I know that we are Mitu, right? That's who showcased our book club. That was so beautiful. And so much gratitude, especially for you, June. I really just want to say, I know
Oh yeah. I mean, we're like, man, it was a catalyst. It was like we had all these things and we were sitting all on them and we didn't quite know how to get to the next, like we knew what we wanted, but we didn't know how to get there. And so I think your guidance and help was just like, and you're so good at like, just do it. We're like, okay.
Don't try. Do.
Yeah, we're like, yes, we're on it.
There is no plan B. And here's the beautiful thing, because it's like I have so many people who apply for my programs who want to be writers. And as I have been stepping into more abundance for myself, I get to celebrate that I don't have to be the one that holds the container for everybody who comes to me, which is why I'm like, oh yes, finally I have people I can refer others to. And so I'm like, hey, you want to become a better writer? That's not exactly what I do. And so I'm like, check out Las Doctoras. And so it brings me so much joy to be able to send folks over to you, and then they come back to me saying, thank you so much for referring that course to me. It has changed my life. So tell us more about like your next writing course and who it's for. And let's just go there.
I'm like, yeah.
And other ways that people can play with you.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm not sure when this episode will air, but we have a writing ceremony, a free writing ceremony coming up this Sunday, August 22nd. Then we have a mini writing retreat. I'm like, when is it? September 11th. That's a paid offering, but it's you get a really good taste of what we do in our course. And our course starts September 26th. It's an 8-week course, lots of writing, lots of I'm like, what is it? What do we call it? Just lots of inner reflection. We do art, lots of meditation, visualization, being in community,
writing, sharing, and
we have our season 4 coming out most likely in September
our
podcast. And then right now we're currently in submission mode for our magazine. Our fall edition will be released September 22nd. I made a list of things yesterday.
So you did it. Amazing.
I'm like, coming soon, there's going to be a Las Doctoras post with all the different dates and things that we have going on. I like there's so many. And our book club, we're going to relaunch that very soon. We've got lots of fun stuff with that, I think.
And then that flow, I think we're just trying to bring like every season, out into the world.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. So even if you're hearing this somewhere in the middle of this, there will be another flow, another wave of these offerings, seasonally.
Yeah.
And June, I feel like I should just say you should submit to the magazine,
Yes. And June was one.
We invite that in,
Let me check in with my wounded academic self as well. Like, I'll read my journal entries, see what I find.
I have to say that's the biggest thing. So we can have people come through our writing course and do a lot of writing. And then the minute we're like, okay, now let's share, contraction.
Freeze.
Everybody goes into like, and so we're not, I think that's where we're at. We're at this point of like, okay, how can we really communicate to people that we're not here to gatekeep at all? Even as editors, we approach each piece with all the love and empathy and compassion. And, I think that's where we're at. We're really trying to get people into that next step of sharing their work.
And that's the real healing, right? It's not about just the writing. It's about the recognition that what you write is enough. And I'm not going to lie, I think there is some intimidation knowing that, oh, these are professors, these are people with these high credentials who are holding this container, and there's trauma within academia, and so it's like, oh, they're going to grade me, and you're here to like heal the wounds that we have walked away with from being in school our whole lives.
Yeah.
So in this process, what is it that you have been doing to stay grounded, and what is it that you have learned to release or are learning to release?
I'm like learning to release lots of perfectionism, scarcity. That's a big lesson from you, June. Like releasing scarcity, releasing the idea that like, so I think sometimes we, you know, like when we got featured on the book club, and sometimes we feel this pressure, like, oh, we have to like, you know, revamp the book club immediately. And we're like, no, if that's not what we're feeling, it's okay. You know, time is okay. We don't have to be on it all the time. So really releasing the idea of like having to overwork or burn ourselves out, you know, all of that. And how I stay grounded. I have to sit at my altar. I have to pull cards. I've got to talk to my ancestors. And sometimes I just have to be okay doing nothing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You know, I'm definitely releasing, like I'm doing this parasite cleanse right now with Rocio Navarro, and it's water healing. It's really good. Renee inspired it too. So I love all the, and so I know that there are parasites, you know, like literal and figurative, like, you know, physical and metaphysical in my life. And so I'm just releasing like any energy that doesn't come back to me, that wants, you know, my highest good, you know, in mind, just constant, but it's constant, right? Things. And then also I am breathing in, I think a deep connection with the earth and the sky. I do a lot of gardening. I do a lot of coming into ritual and rhythms in the morning with my little one, and just being present to the magic here. That's been my word today, magic. So I'll embrace it. It feels really good.
Yeah. And you live it. You are magic, girl. You bringing in some astrology in this, and like freaking teaching a university course on witches. I wish I had that course. So what is a ritual or practice that you can invite people to embody as they are reconnecting with themselves and their own ancestors?
I want to suggest, and Renee, I want a space, you know, a simple thing, you know, and I say that mine is still in like working order. You know, I'm trying to, this space, it could be a table, it could be a sit spot, with objects on it, with words on it, something that reminds you to come back to yourself, and come back to remembering who you are. And we do that through, you know, our love for our ancestors. So maybe it has, you know, an ancestors. We've talked a lot about this, but this could be a teacher. It could be like a sister. It could be like an abuela, an alola, you know, like, but a space that reminds you to come back to who you are.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we talk a lot about, again, the writing process and what that looks like. And I think we don't give ourselves enough time to daydream. Like we don't give ourselves enough time to just like brainstorm, but with like, for me, the shower is like, is where all the ideas come, you know? And so sometimes I'll just be in the shower, just sitting there, like almost like talking out things, you know, and like, what does that feel like? Or sometimes I'll be in the car when I had my commute, right? I would be in the car and I would get these bursts of inspiration and I would just talk them out like to myself. And that was my daydreaming. And sometimes I would be like, man, it's wasted time. Right. And now I'm starting to realize like, no, I actually need that in order to be able to produce even our podcast, sometimes an episode, I'm like, oh, what's the theme? Let me talk that out to myself. So I really invite people to give themselves time to just imagine, just like float your mind out into wherever it needs to go, and just like, daydream.
So my last question, which is my favorite, and of course, for our listeners who are feeling called to join Writing to Our Ancestors, to no longer dream about being published, but pass all the gatekeepers and explore what it might be like to be featured on the St. Lunita magazine, or you're just curious, I will leave the links in the show notes, or you can follow Las Doctoras at las.doctoras on Instagram. It's so lit in there. It's brought me so much joy to also receive your medicine, because like what you're experiencing in your programs, I get so much healing from my students, my clients, who really are more than just clients and students, but are like the sisters that I pray for. And so like, thank you for trusting me to just like witness you birth that which has always been there. I'm excited to continue this journey with you for like not just this lifetime, but as many lifetimes as possible, until we all can experience liberation, whether it's through writing or whatever other modalities that we are remembering. But as ancestors in the making, if you could envision yourself as this ancestor, looking back on your present day life, what is it that you would say to yourself in this moment?
I'm like, I think we actually do a writing prompt that we explore this. So I want to name that Cristina and I often envision our abuelita selves at the party, sitting in the corner, sipping on tequila and calling everybody over and being like, come here, mija, let's have a little chat, So I think that's the vision that we see. But in terms of what I would tell my present self, what's coming to me is, I told you would do it, bitch. Like, just very matter of factly, like, it's gonna happen. Like, don't even stress. Just, you're good. You're good.
Love it. I love it. I definitely heard my abuela self say, mija, this is it. Mija, this is it. This is life. This is like your one precious life. And this moment, looking around, this is it. This is it. And I didn't realize I needed to hear that, until this moment too. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for being the professors, the doctoras, and the brujerias that we prayed for.
I love it. We need to like quote that. That's gotta go there.
Yes. And then you can use my name. I'm happy to leave a testimonial.
For sure.
It'll be on the website today.